Are you new to the world of epoxy and you're researching, trying to find that right resin brand to dive into? Have you been in the hobby for a while now and you're tired of your current resin and you're just trying to see if there's a better resin out there? Let me introduce you to Upstart Epoxy. One of the things I love about Upstart Epoxy is it's made in the USA. And that's really important to me. But if that's not what's important to you, what should be important to you is how easy it is to use Upstart Epoxy's products. It's very beginner friendly. It's easy to measure, it's easy to mix, it's just easy to work with. I find it safe to say that Upstart Epoxy is a great product for your beginners as well as your expert level artists. I've been using Upstart Epoxy exclusively for about 4 years now, and I love it just as much today as I did when I first found them. Something else that's also important, and I get a lot of questions about this in my resin projects, is Upstart Epoxy's resins are food safe. And when I say food safe, I mean the finished product. After it's all hardened and ready to go, it is safe to put food on it. But while I'm talking about that, I'd like to answer another question that I get quite often is, can you cut food on these like a cutting board? My answer is no. Think about it. Once the resin hardens and you cut into it, you're going to leave those knife marks in there and you're going to ruin your beautiful finished product. So no, I do not recommend using these as cutting boards. That's when you introduce things like the bacteria that obviously are not food safe. If you're going to make anything dealing with food with these, I highly recommend that it's just for serving purposes, display purposes, things like that. They make great charcuterie boards and serving trays. I don't recommend a cutting board. One of the other things that Upstart Epoxy highlights and advertises is that they have low odor and no VOCs. Basically, what that means is when you open up the bottles and you start mixing, there's not this putrid, high chemical smell that's pouring out of the mixing cup and filling up your home or your shop. There's a wide variety of epoxy brands for you to choose from. No matter which brand you go with, you need to pay attention to how that epoxy brand recommends that you mix their product. Epoxy resin is usually going to be mixed one of two ways, either by volume or by weight. Upstart Epoxy brand, you have to mix theirs by volume. And there's a good reason for that. Let's use Upstart Epoxy's deep pour resin as an example. So you have two parts, a part A and a part B. And so for Upstart Epoxy's deep pour resin, it is a 2-to-1 mix ratio, 2 parts of A to 1 part of B, which is the hardener. Now when you measure these out, the part A, the resin, weighs more than the hardener, which is part B. So if you're measuring out, it's going to throw your measurements off. I think maybe an easier example for you to understand, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, the tabletop resin is a 1-to-1 mix ratio. So equal parts of the resin to the equal part of the hardener. However, if you're going to measure that by weight, the resin weighs more than the hardener. So it's going to throw your mixture off. And so you're not going to get an equal part of each in the mixture. Say all that to say this, measure by volume. Another great thing about Upstart Epoxy is on their website, they have an online resin calculator that you can use, and it takes all the guesswork out of it and it does it for you. Once you take your measurements and you get your length and your width of where you're pouring and then the depth, how deep you want that pour to go, you just input those numbers into the online calculator and it spits out the volume. It even tells you if you're going to purchase their product for that specific project, it'll give you a recommended amount of how many gallons you should order of that particular product. When you're trying to convert the volume to ounces, it's easy. You take your volume, divide that by 1.8, boom, it gives you the number of ounces that you need to pour. Okay, let's break down the different types of resin that they have and what their uses are, give you a little bit of detail about each one. There are some brands out there that have a lot of different resins that are used for very specific things. The ease of choosing a product with Upstart Epoxy is they give you 3 choices. The deep pour epoxy is an easy 2-to-1 mix ratio. For their deep pour resin, Upstart Epoxy recommends that you do pours only up to 2 inches at a time. And even that is really based on the volume that you're using. The greater the volume that you have, the more opportunities you're going to have for things to fail and things to go wrong. So the deep pour resin has about a 6 to 12 hour working time. What that means is for the first 6 to 12 hours, again, it depends on the volume. and how much resin you're pouring. If you need to make changes, add or pop bubbles, or do anything with that project or that resin at that time to make changes to that pour, you have up until 6 to 12 hours, give or take, that you can safely make those changes and everything will work out fine. The deep pour resin has a 72-hour cure time, meaning once you pour it, you have to wait 72 hours for it to harden so that you can move on to the next phase of that particular project. So, what would you use the deep pour resin for? Well, the most common is probably like your river tables or your river-shaped serving trays, charcuterie boards, things like that. I make a ton of those. I make a lot of clocks. Pretty much anything that you're gonna go more than 1/8 of an inch, you need to be using their deep pour resin. Okay, moving on to the tabletop resin. It is a super simple 1-to-1 mix ratio with a high gloss finish. And it is a beautiful high gloss finish. Just about anything that I make, I'm gonna finish it with the tabletop resin on at least the top surface and get that high gloss finish. The tabletop cures crystal clear. And I mean crystal clear. Tabletop resin has a 4 to 6 hour working time. Tabletop resin is also self-leveling. The tabletop resin has a 24-hour curing time, so much quicker than the deep pour. When would you use the tabletop resin? You're gonna use this anytime that you want to just do a top coat. It is what it says it is. It is a tabletop resin. That doesn't mean you have to use it on only tables, but basically anything that you want to top coat on. Upstart Epoxy, as well as myself, recommends that you do not pour anything more than 1/8 of an inch at a time with this. You may also hear me and others refer to the top coat as a flood coat, and I get a lot of flack about how much waste there is when I do a flood coat and all that drips off the side and it ends up, after it all cures, I peel up all this excess stuff. Oh, you just wasted so much resin. It's a flood coat. Flood. You flood the surface. So Upstart Epoxy's Art Resin is also a 1-to-1 mix ratio. It's very similar to the tabletop. There are some minor differences, but I want to cover the Art Resin and the specifics of this, okay? It is a super simple 1-to-1 mix ratio, just like the tabletop. Just like the tabletop, you don't want to do anything greater than 1/8 of an inch pour at a time on this. This is really just made for your art projects. It is crystal clear. It has a 35-minute-ish working time, 48 hours for a cure. It does have a high gloss finish. It is self-leveling. Upstart Epoxy says that the Art Resin has about a 6-month shelf life. I'll say that I keep mine for longer than that, and it's fine. How long? I don't know. I don't know. I don't use the Art Resin as much as I do the others. I always try to keep some on hand though. I have come across times where I had issues where my tabletop didn't cure exactly how I wanted. There was some blemishes and things like that. That was all my error, not the product. But I did come back and use the Art Resin to help touch up and fix some of those areas, and you never knew the difference. I always keep some Art Resin on hand. Do I keep it longer than 6 months? Yes. Do I recommend it? Upstart Epoxy says that it's a 6-month shelf life. So when would you use the Art Resin? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. The name says it. For your artsy projects, right? Your little keychains and arts and crafts. I don't do a lot of them. Like, it's a huge market out there for the little art projects. The ocean art that I love and I want to learn how to do at some point. Another question I get is, what is the big difference between tabletop and Art Resin? Because they are very similar. They both got a 1-to-1 mix ratio. They both, you wouldn't do more than 1/8 of an inch pour at a time. You know, they're both self-leveling. For me, the biggest difference is the working time. Tabletop has a 4 to 6 hour working time. This has about a half-hour working time. The exothermic reaction begins much sooner in this than it does in that. However, the cure time on this is twice as long. So you got a 24-hour cure time on the tabletop, and for the Art Resin, Upstart Epoxy says give it 48 hours. The Art Resin does have a higher viscosity than the tabletop, and the tabletop resin has a pretty thick viscosity. When talking about viscosity, we're talking about, you know, like the thickness, kind of, is it just really thick like syrup, or is it really thin like water? The deep pour resin has a very low viscosity and is super flowy. It's like water, y'all. if you're building your own molds and forms out of wood, you need to seal them, because if you get a leak on that mold, this stuff is going to find it really quick and it's going to go everywhere. So that's really important. That's why typically I stick to the hard plastic preformed molds, or silicone molds typically are my go-to, because there's no risk of leaking there. The tabletop is much thicker. There are some tips and tricks that you can use to lower the viscosity. The Art Resin does have a slightly thicker and heavier viscosity than the tabletop. So that's all things dealing with their different types of resin. I want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the other products other than the resin that Upstart Epoxy offers. I'll start with the things that they've offered for quite a while, and I'll move into some of the more exciting things that they're starting to dip their toes into. So Upstart Epoxy has their own colorants, right? Their own mica powders. These are the Polycolor. This is just one of the packs that you can get. They're very vibrant colors. One of the cool things I like about using their colorant is a lot of them, when you start stirring, you'll see people stir and it gives those little waves and cool effects in the resin. A lot of these colorants, a lot of these mica powders have almost like a two-tone, like an undertone to them, and so it makes the swirl patterns and things like that really pop and looks fantastic. Something else they offer in the colorant world is their Color Creator pack, and that is a whole box of 20 different small bottles of the alcohol ink. A lot of people prefer these because it's kind of easy to measure out. I like the mica powder better. I will add these sometimes, especially the darker colors, to the mica powder to kind of give it a little bit more of a two-tone effect. In this pack though, is really cool. There's other things in here, glitter packs, some metallic packs. The Color Creator pack is something I don't always use, but there's stuff in there that is always great to add into your projects as a little touch. I highly recommend keeping a pack of these on hand. Now this little box right here, that's my personal one. You don't get one of these when you order it, sorry. Something else really cool, anytime you order any of Upstart Epoxy's products, send you a little pack with all the things that you need to kind of get started, care instructions and things like that. Lots of useful information on there. They even give you one of these little plastic spreaders, a little foam brush, and then they give you some little craft sticks for stirring your smaller volumes. Now, for me, the most exciting thing that Upstart Epoxy has gotten into recently is their silicone molds. Now this is Old Betty here. This is the 18 by 12 silicone mold, like the serving tray mold that I've had. It was the very first one I got from them. It's a fantastic mold, and I've used this a lot. I've got two of them. I go back to this a lot. They've started upping their game a little bit though. They are making different types of molds. I'm really hopeful that they'll come out with even more in the future. I talk with them all the time about, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? I'm very hopeful that they're gonna expand their silicone mold offerings in the future. But right now, they've got, this is the 18-inch round silicone mold. I think it's around 2 inches deep. And then they've got the 12-inch here. I think I've got two of these as well. I've also got the mid-century modern plant stand mold. I got a video that I did not too long ago on that if you want to go watch it. It's just two parts that you pour and then you put the two pieces together, and it's a cross section that you can put a large plant onto. Hey, so that's all things Upstart Epoxy. I really hope that you learned something. Hopefully I've piqued your interest at least enough to try some of their products. It's high quality. I only use Upstart Epoxy's resin, and I'm really excited about the future of the company with them getting into other products that they're gonna be selling. I know it's a little late in the game, but I got so excited to talk about the products, I forgot to tell you that if you're enjoying this, or if you really like it, or at least if you made it this far, throw me a bone, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so that you can get updates on all of our upcoming videos that are going to be released. I'm really excited about an upcoming video that I'm going to be working on where I talk about all the tips and tricks dealing with epoxy resin projects and kind of things that I wish I'd have known when I was first getting into epoxy work. In the meantime, go check out their website. It's worth a try. It's worth a look. It's worth your money. Go make some sawdust, and we'll see you really soon.